Hello, all you delicious souls out there, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I'm your host, Devanin, and I'm here with my homegirl, Adrienne Zetty, who is a mortician. Yes, I'm talking with a woman who deals with the dead today, darling, and I can't wait to get into it. How the fucks is you doing?
I am so excited. I just finished my funeral directors and morticians have difficult schedules most of the time. So I'm just finishing up my 10-day run. So I am doing absolutely nothing today except for talking with you, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, I'm excited to have made it on your schedule. So, I want to read over a few statistics before we get into like the questions. And so, it's very rare you come across a mortician unless somebody didn't died, as a friend or in passing. And so this is a very, very thing career field that a lot of people it's just not talked about. So,
Absolutely.
you know, it's not like you're gonna be at dinner and be like, oh, so, I was dealing with this body the other day or whatever the case may be. And so in my research, and this website that I pulled this information from is called Zippia, Zippia.com. It says there are over 22,000 funeral directors currently in the United States. 64.7% of them are men, and about 35% of them are women. I was pleased to research that women are paid the same as men.
Kinda.
Kinda.
It's true. It's true. But so you have to look at typically if you have a male dominated field, when women start coming into that field, rather than women's base pay rising to meet their men, more often than not, the average salary goes down, sadly enough. So, but yeah, so with assertiveness and shrewd salary negotiations, typically, yeah, it is pretty equal. And I would like to point out, yes, it is a majority male field at the moment, but al almost any funeral school, any funeral program is gonna have a majority of women in it at this point nowadays. So all of the new funeral directors, so people coming into the field right now are by and large majority women. For instance, in my graduating class, one I think there was one guy, maybe 2 guys made it. I'm not sure there's one, I don't think passed final, but 90% of the class was female.
Do you think that that has to do with a breakdown of the patriarchy?
I think I think it has to do with it's a good question. I think it has to do with women the value that women add to funeral services is it's kind of unique. There's a certain kind of warmth, I think, and a tenderness that we bring to it. Not to say that we're not all tough broads, you know what I mean? Like, we can still hold our own with the fellas in terms of the physical demands and the emotional demands of it. But I think there's a certain je ne sais quoi, I think that women add to funeral service. And I think that's appreciated by families. And so I think when I first started, I think a lot of families kind of would see a female funeral director and think it was like the B team coming out. So I know your eyebrow raises exactly how I would feel the couple of times that I've encountered that. But as soon as they experience the kind of service that that women offer, I think that breaks down any kind of misgivings that people have because it is a traditionally male career.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, well, yeah, I would say then that it's probably along that patriarchal like breakdown because what you're saying is that they didn't think that you could do it just because you're a girl, and
Correct.
but the proof is in the pudding, and the world is changing now, and it's not all about old white men running every fucking thing anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. And if you notice, it's old white men, bless their hearts, that have kind of painted the industry in a corner to a certain extent. It's the old I don't know if you've seen the movie The Big Lebowski, but there's a scene
Mm.
where one of the characters dies and they go to the mortician, he offers this is our most modestly. You know what I mean? There's a certain kind of attitude or approach to funeral directing and how we monetize the services that we offer people, you know what I mean? So a lot of the misconceptions that people have, not just about female funeral directors, but a lot of people have a very negative impression of the industry in general. So I won't say we're as bad as car salesmen, used car salesmen, but a lot of people, they come, they're sitting across the desk from the funeral director for the first time. If they've not had that kind of experience, they just kind of know what they know from TV or from, what happened with Aunt Gladys's service or, they hear something. And so they come and they're sitting down across from me and they have a lot of people are very guarded because they have this idea that my job is to separate them from their money, to try to get them to prove how much they love their mom by spending more on a casket, that kind of thing. So those fears from the general public are from generations of, same old kind of treatment. And so I think women coming into the industry, hopefully, is kind of helping the industry itself to express value to consumers, so that we can really show them that it's not just, sell you or, whatever they're trying to sell you. It's not about that. It's about family care, personal care to the families. So hopefully it's redefining the value that we offer.
Mhm. Nothing like some good value honey. Now, one this this website also is saying that funeral directors are most in demand in Tucson, Arizona. Now, if that I don't doubt them, but I wonder why, and I used to live in Tucson when I was stationed in the Air Force. I wonder, have you heard of any kind of, like, demand in a certain city or state more than another, or do you have any idea why in Tucson
I
you
think it probably correlates to a higher retirement age population. So if Tucson, Arizona is a popular area for folks to retire to when they're tired of the cold, Northeast winters, that they would go to Miami or Tucson, you know what I mean? That you'd have a higher demand for funeral services in general.
that makes
That's
sense.
my best guess.
That makes perfect sense. You're so smart, I love it. We called them snow bunnies when I was stationed
Yes.
back up there.
I've been called a snow bunny before.
Oh, we're not talking about role playing, honey, or getting our Wolf of Wall Street on too. It is if you haven't seen the movie, then you'll know what I mean with the snow bunny references there. Yeah, so there's, like whenever it starts to turn cold in Arizona, there's this large, migration of RVs and shit that just swarm down into Tucson or wherever whenever it starts to get cold in general, because then people get the fuck away from the ice and they come down somewhere like that that's not that's not gonna be iced out. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I wonder if it's like a Breaking Bad reference. It's like people getting shot up or whatever, but what she said made more sense.
I don't know, but that could be a part of it too. I mean, it could be sad to say, with substance use issues, sometimes play into it. So if you have, endemic issues in a, larger metropolitan area, that might sadly, bring up the death rate.
So you mentioned, like, school. What kind of training, is required? And tell us well, before we get into the training, tell us exactly what you do and explain to us the difference between a funeral director, mortician, and an undertaker. What's your
Okay.
official title?
So some of those titles are a distinction without a difference kind of things. So and some of them are just kind of more old fashioned. So like the old guard would more often than not identify themselves as a mortician or an undertaker. Nowadays, more people say funeral director. It's a little imprecise because and it does vary state by state, but so that could mean that they are just front of the house, so to speak, that their only job is to sit and meet with families, to plan services, to make funeral arrangements, and or to take out them services, go out to church and stuff. But that it could also so most of the time I would introduce myself as a funeral director. Now I am also an embalmer, so I do front of the house and back of the house. Some states it's it's one license to do both duties. In other states, you can get a funeral directing only license or an embalmer's only license. That's a little less frequent. And also, there are some states that are either completely unregulated, like Colorado, or states like Florida that have introduced something that's kind of like, I don't want to, no offense anybody, but like funeral director light. Like it's an easier to obtain license that allows them to do most of the jobs of the front of the house of funeral directors under the guidance of a full-fledged, fully licensed funeral director. So, but it's those are the three basic duties: the making arrangements, carrying out services, and then embalming back of the house, whatever kind of prep work and care for the actual the physical care of the deceased that we take care of.
So when you go to school for one, do you go to school for all of them and they just kind of train you on everything or and it
Yeah, most of the time. I'd say like the typical route is going to be there's before COVID and after COVID. So I would say after COVID, I mean, online schooling was existed before COVID, certainly, but it seems like that seems to be primarily, how most people since COVID go to funerals. So I went well before COVID. And so I physically went to school. So I physically showed up in class every day and it's a 2-year program. So most of those programs are something like they'll have like a base requirement. Like you'll have to have had, let's say 60 hours of something, just going to college, math, whatever. And then after you have a requisite number of hours, you can apply to be in the program. And then typically it's a 2-year program. It's an associate's degree in most places. There are some places in a couple of states that actually require a bachelor's degree, but the majority of the time it's a 2-year associate's degree program. Some of the programs are a little more regimented. Some of them are more flexible. And by that, I mean, like, there are some programs where you take class 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next semester you take 5, 6, 7, 8, versus some other programs that are a little more self-selecting for the students, but that tend to take longer. So it might take 4 years to graduate, for instance. So, but it's pretty, I always joked I should have tried out for Jeopardy after I finished funeral school because you study a little bit of everything. So, I mean, there's, history, religion, law, accounting, computers, English, chemistry, pathology, all kinds of stuff. It really runs the gamut. So it's pretty challenging and difficult. And then once typically you graduate from your program and then you have permission to sit for the national exam, the national board exam. There's two parts: funeral directing and embalming, and arts and sciences. And then you are licensed by the state and then you do whatever you're doing. Now there's also mixed in there an apprenticeship. So you have your schooling and then you have your actual work experience. And the two are surprisingly different. So what you're learning in school is to pass the national board exam. And it's very frequently, at the very least, it's a different kind of information than when you're actually practicing funeral directing and embalming. Do you see what I mean? Like what your day-to-day skill set looks a little bit different in the reality of it versus the school part of it. Sure that happens in other professions too, I'm sure.
right. But why did you choose this career path? Did you feel like it was a calling? Do you feel like it was like a spiritual thing? Like of all the things you could have been in all the 9 realms, why this?
That is a great question. And I came into it relatively late. So I had gotten my bachelor's 10 years before I decided to go to funeral school. And for a long time, I guess in my personal case, it was important to me that I find meaning in what I do. Like I wanted to make sure that I come from a long line of some good people that, were social workers and psychiatric nurses, and their whole careers were spent caring for and dedicated to people. And so I kind of wanted to do something that felt like it had that kind of impact. But, I got a degree in philosophy and religion, so I ran a college bookstore for 10 years, like you do. So I guess I had a couple of life experiences. I had a couple of friends that either died or had a close family member die. And through those interactions and those events, I think that kind of planted a seed. And when I decided against law school, it kind of occurred to me personally that I would have been a good lawyer, wedding planner, therapist, pastor, nurse, carpenter, like all of the different component skills that you kind of smush together to make a good funeral director. But once it occurred to me, and I was into my 30s, I was well into my 30s. it was like, duh, you know, and then I like ran the thought past a couple of people who know me best. And they were like, oh yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And then from there on out, that was it. And I've been doing it full force ever since. And you're right. To me, it is a vocation. It is a calling. It's not something that you just do like instead of, you know, getting your insurance license. You know what I mean? You don't just capriciously happen upon it. I don't think. I think the best funeral directors would be hard pressed to find happiness in any other line of work, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
it makes perfect damn sense. But have you ever thought about getting out of this career field since you've
Well,
done
you always kind of have to have, I don't want to say an exit strategy, but it is a quickly changing field. And so I'm a very opinionated, strident kind of person. And so far I have been able to afford my integrity throughout my career, but you know, you have to be able to, you know, you got to keep working and you have to, you know, if there ever comes a time when you're not going to be able to find an environment that you're comfortable working in, then you have to have an exit strategy. And it's also incredibly physically demanding. It's almost every embalmer I know has a bad back and a lot of them have cancers. It just kind of comes with the territory. It's, you know, it's constant exposure, not constant, but I mean, it's plentiful exposure to some pretty nasty chemicals. And while there are certain safeguards that we take, there's a certain amount of risk, you know, that we that we take on.
Well, that brings me to my next question. I was gonna ask you about, like, pathogens and physical safety and things like that. I was thinking in terms of, like, coming in contact with blood or whatever that is, you know, whatever's in the body, but where the fuck are people getting cancer from it? I mean, you say it so casually as though, "Oh, well, another person." Yeah, not like you don't care, but, like, it happens so damn much. What but how can cancer be that prevalent in your career field and people aren't getting sued or something? Do you have to sign, like, waivers or some shit or what?
No, but I guess it's just something that's understood specifically when we go through funeral school and we take chemistry classes and we know about, you know, we know about the dangers of formaldehyde. So there are chemicals that we use in this country that other countries don't allow because of that, you know, kind of from the protecting the practitioner kind of point of view. We don't really have those kind of protections. You know, I think, I mean, honestly, I don't know many people in the industry that are like fighting for those protections necessarily either. So it's just kind of an accepted risk that we take, I guess.
Hey, if it works for y'all, let it work. It works for me too.
You got to die somehow. You know what I mean? So the fact that we have a little bit more exposure, you know, I think it's that sometimes we're called the last first responders, but I think a lot of first responders have that. There's just a certain amount of risk that you have, you know, ER nurses and, you know, cops, firemen, you know, it's service. We're doing service. I don't want to compare us to the real first responders, as it were, but it's a similar kind of, there is risk that is inherent to the job. So we do what we can, but it's always going to be there.
Everyone has their role to play, firefighters or whatever, but having to do with somebody's last rites is a is a high honor as old as time.
It is. It's
So,
sacred.
it is
It is
most
sacred. And that's kind of the joke I make is that, you know, when most people talk about the world's oldest profession, it's talking about something else. But in truth, you know, funeral, the job of caring for the dead has been around since time immemorial. So, so yeah, it is. It is. It's sacred. It really is. So it's sometimes it's a lot of day-to-day stuff too. You know, it's a lot of bureaucracy and logistics and that kind of stuff. But when you really get down to the core of it, when we're interacting with families, when we're there, we're the first people that, you know, we're the first call. It is. It's a high honor.
For the schooling, do you have to do continuing education courses every year?
Yes, most states. So, like I said, Colorado, for instance, there's not a license that's required to practice in Colorado. So I think in that case, there's not. And certainly the rules are different. In some states, it's, you know, 24 hours in a year, 12 hours and yada, yada, yada. But yes, there is absolutely continuing education. And hopefully, you know, practitioners are excited about that in the sense that just the developments in science and the way that the chemicals that we use are evolving. There's always something more to learn. So
Mhm. How many funerals do you do a day, or what's the most you've done in a day?
that's hard to answer because so a funeral versus making funeral arrangements. So there are, I would say nowadays in most places, cremations, specifically direct cremation. So that's a cremation with no associated rights or services. So it's for the most part a matter of paperwork so that a body may be cremated and then you return the urn to the family and that's it. So I think for the highest volume firm I was at, I think I was handling like 12 to 14 cases a week. Now, of those, only maybe 2 or 3 would actually be and would involve a church or like going somewhere or doing something or viewing the body or doing any of the associated rites. So, and it's different rates in different communities. So in Louisiana, where I first got my license, there's a lot of Catholics, and Catholics have a lot of rites and rituals that are associated with death and with burial. So we had a lot of services there. So, but I've also worked in more kind of secular communities. I worked around, in New Orleans when COVID hit. So there were a lot of services where there were no services. It was just here for the deceased and that was it.
Right, and so she mentioned Louisiana. She used to live down here. She's up in Maine and now
I am.
eating up all my damn lobster.
That's
Um,
a big ass crawfish up here, huh?
I like your style. I'm picking up what you're putting down, baby. So so what's the most amount of bodies you've embalmed in a day? I'm just trying to get a feel for,
In
like.
a day? Mm, 3, maybe 4, but I'm not I'm a very good embalmer, but I don't consider the speed with which I embalm a body as an indicator of how good I am at embalming. So there are some embalmers that are like, I can embalm in 45 minutes or something like that. So, but to me, that the timing of it doesn't reflect the quality of the embalming. So for the most part, it takes, I'd say an hour and a half, 2 hours. They could be a lot longer. They could be a lot more complicated. It literally everybody is unique. And so certain things you want a one pointer would be the thing that the embalmer most efficiently is going to go for, and that's where we only have one point of entry into the arterial system. But sometimes, shit happens and you have to raise other sites. And so every time you have to raise a different site, that adds on time. So
Do you remember the first body you ever embalmed?
I remember the first autopsy body that I encountered. No, I do actually. No, I do remember. Well, not the first body that I embalmed. I remember the first time that I saw an embalming. And
Okay.
it was at one school that had essentially they had the contract that they would care for all of the indigent population. So if a homeless person passed away, they would kind of cycle through the funeral school and then go be cremated. And so the very first embalming I saw was a little off-putting to me because it was kinda like, the teacher said, "Go," and then you have, like, 5 students just, like, go at it, and it felt very unsacred, I guess, and so I was like, "I don't know if I can do this, you guys." So, but then I went back, and then the next embalming I saw was kind of a demonstration, so it was someone who was coming to show a specific skill, so it was one embalmer working on the body, and he was much more respectful, and that kind of helped me feel settled a little bit. So, but yeah, so I do remember that, and it is quite an adjustment, as is, like I mentioned, the autopsy. The first time I walked in and saw an autopsy body, I would said to my classmates, "If I pass out, I'm not even embarrassed because this is horrifying." It's really existentially distressing, to see. So, but power through it, and that's I think the thing that helps people kind of get over that bump is, like I mentioned, kind of the craftsmanship of it, that we put people back together, and so they leave looking a hell of a lot better than they did when they came in. So that's the goal, and so that's part of, I think, how how we can deal with what we deal with.
So with an autopsy, are you like peeling the skin back and digging in there versus with embalming, you're like using more like tools to put stuff in?
Yeah, so for an unautopsy body, personally, I try to be as minimally intrusive as possible. So, yeah, so we would try if I can raise one area and that is sufficient to accomplish what I need to accomplish with arterial embalming, great. With autopsies, you don't have a choice. It's already been decided for you that it's going to be a different process. So, but yes, it's very they're open, and then you do what you're doing with the arterial system, and you treat everything, and then close them back up. But yeah, it's a lot.
Talk to me about paranormal activity. Because so a person, when they die, when their spirit depart like is severed from the body, but when they're in your hands, they have not officially been laid to rest yet. And so they're kind of like in a waiting period, like their soul is at this time.
Yeah.
So have you ever seen a spirit? Has anyone spoken to you?
Yeah. So not every funeral director would they don't all believe in paranormal activity. So I've seen some shit though. So yeah, no, I've seen a couple of my favorite one. I was standing in the prep room. I know I was ironing a flag or something. I don't know. And I look over and there was a cork board on the wall and two pieces of paper, not on one tack, on two separate tacks. Two pieces of paper out of nowhere flew vertically and then fell down. And so it wasn't like a loose tack and it gingerly, flitted down to the floor. No, this like flew across the room. And all I could do is say, hello, I acknowledge that something is here and I hope that you're doing okay. And I'm just going to do what I'm doing. And that's pretty much it. But yeah, no, most of the places that I've worked, most of the people acknowledge at least a little bit of funny business. The first place, the place where I did my apprenticeship, had a name. I forgot what they named. It was like Bessie or something. But like it was so frequent that certain things would happen to clocks in the room and this and that, and that they named her. So or him. I don't know. I didn't ask the gender, but and I've heard things before, which is a little off-putting. So, but a lot of these funeral homes, they're very, very old buildings. So, and if they've been funeral homes for that long, then yeah, it's not really surprising.
When you say you heard things, is it like a rattling noise, an auditory voice?
I've
When
heard auditory voices. I've heard my name when I was verifiably the only person on the floor or in the building. To the extent that I got up from what I was doing and kind of walked around like, "Hello? Who's there?" You know what I mean? So, that's happened a couple of times. So but not every place, surprisingly. So, the place that I'm currently working out of, I haven't really I haven't really encountered anything, and even though I probably work with more of the kind of spooky oriented people in the field at my current location, it's not no one's ever mentioned anything at this particular so that's it's not just the funeral homes. I think it has there's more to it than that. Who am I to say?
I would say such, funeral homes and places that are like a congregation of the dead would prove to be some sort of a nexus point, you know?
Yeah, no, and it's different cultures have different ideas of it too. So in I just did a Cambodian Buddhist funeral, and that is a part of it. So there's a big part of it is the monks come and they do this beautiful chanting. And the idea is that they're chanting instructions at the spirit of the deceased to kind of talk them through what their next steps are. Like take a left at the star, you know what I mean? Or whatever it is. So but they're actually trying to help guide spirits that may may not know how to proceed forward. So, but and I also have heard of funeral homes as kind of being a transition point. So I've heard of a couple of good ghost stories wherein they invited whatever entity was bothering them at their own home, and they were just like, "Come on, buddy," and they went to a funeral home and kind of like an elevator to the sky kind of a thing. Like it's a place of transition. But also though, it's the place where the death actually happened, and then the place where the bodies ultimately go. So, graveyards and that kind of thing.
And I would imagine that the newly dead are practicing becoming dead and, and getting used to those new abilities and everything like that, and you're their perfect little guinea pig. I call out your name too. If I'm the if you're, like, working on my body and ain't no one else to talk to, Adrian's here.
Well, and that's it's then there are some people that kind of lean into that. And so I've known people that go so far as to try to find out the deceased person's musical taste. And so rather than playing what I want to hear when I have them in the prep room or if I'm driving them to the cemetery, that you'd play a little Johnny Cash or whatever it is that they were into to, let them feel a little at home at least for their last little time on earth.
Okay, now play me some Beyonce or Madonna, girl. Go ahead on and twerk while you working on me. So, do you ever have any dreams that are related to your job or anything like that?
Not like I used to when I was a waitress. I've had interesting drinks where I'm, pouring coffee in the middle of the night or anything like that. So no, actually, I guess thankfully, no, not too much. I'm pretty good at kind of shaking it off
Yeah,
and
having separating it, compartmentalizing.
I'm so great at it. You know what I mean? I had a difficult childhood, so it's one of my life skills.
I've worked in the service industry, and I still do. I would agree. Waiting tables is way more horrific probably than
It
dealing
is.
with a dead body. At least the bitch can't talk back like the motherfucker Karens and shit.
Oh, you'd be surprised. We get some carrots. We get some, and rightfully so. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't, not to poke fun at families, but there are families that I'd say misbehave, not because of grief, but because of an inflated sense of entitlement. So we get those too. But yeah, not as traumatizing, I don't think, as in the restaurant world, to my recollection.
What the fuck could Karen come into a funeral home, but, like, what could she demand? That is she asking for free shit, cheap reduced shit? What the person's
Sometimes it's I want to come. So, because if you Google a funeral home, they're going to say 24 hours. And what that means is that if a death occurs at 3 o'clock in the morning, we will dutifully respond to you and bring your loved one into our care, regardless of the hour. That does not mean that you can follow, you know, the van back to the funeral home to make arrangements at 3 o'clock in the morning. So there are people that that try to, just show up whenever or demand to make arrangements outside of our normal operating hours. Or I recently had a family that was gobsmacked that a Catholic priest wouldn't have a funeral mass on a Sunday. They don't do that. Okay. They don't do that for archbishops. They don't, that's just not a normal practice. And just, the oh my word, how could you not? You know what I mean? So and or scheduling services before ever talking to the funeral home and then being surprised that, oh, I scheduled this mass to happen 2 days from now. What do you mean you can't? What do you mean you have three other services that day? Or, so that kind of stuff. And so partially, more often than not, it's people not knowing. They haven't made arrangements before, so they don't know. They think, maybe they just have a wrong idea. But sometimes it is just straight up entitlement. So,
So do you see, like, a psychiatrist, or do you kinda meditating? Do you do yoga? How do you keep yourself mentally and emotionally in check?
I am very purposeful about my time away from work. So, there is a tendency I'm tempted to say, especially with the ladies. I've seen it, I think, a little more frequently with my female colleagues than with my male, of being, I don't know, I don't wanna say over invested, but like unable to check out on days off, like not micromanaging or being involved in things instead of just trusting and passing it off to your colleagues on your off days. Cause that's, you can try as we might, we try to minimize any kind of duties. You know what I mean? If a brand new family comes in and needs services on my day 10, I'm most likely not going to be the director that sits with him to make arrangements because I am almost assuredly going to be out, as those arrangements need to be made. So some funeral directors have trouble setting those boundaries between being at work and being available. So I'm pretty good about that, setting boundaries. So on my off times, I'm off for the most part. So that's a big part of it. I am I have a very supportive partner so I have some mutual accountability in my household, which helps. So if I have had a particularly nasty day and I wasn't able to kind of shake it off on my way home, on my commute or something like that, that I have, my husband that can kind of sense that and give me an opportunity to talk about something if I need to, if I'm struggling with some and it's I think as a surprise to you, it has less to do with any kind of the grossness of my job, more so than it does about the emotional turmoil that we deal with. It's hard. I'm very empathetic, and so it's difficult to see people suffer and then have to just, you know, I don't know, it's hard to see people suffer and not have a way to help them. And so, in one sense of it, I think it's easier for me because instead of just seeing suffering and just being like, "Oh, I wish I knew what I could do," I actually do know what to do in some circumstances. And so it's not just passively seeing suffering happen. I see the same suffering that everyone else does, but I can actually step up and I can help out and I can hopefully bring a little bit of peace to some people. And that is rewarding in and of itself. So I think that kind of feeds pours into my cup, as it were. That's a metaphor we hear a lot. It's you can't pour from an empty cup. So I try to focus on ways to pour back into my cup. And so thank you notes. If I'm really down or if I'm really exhausted, I have my thank you notes for my families. And that means the world to me. And that is just a reminder of why I'm doing what I do. And that helps too. So and then also mood altering substances. So and Bravo personally helps me a lot. So
Well, this is the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, so it's on the drugs right now. Drugs, man, and everything's a fucking drug. Fucking coffee, the fucking drug,
yeah.
caffeine. So, I heard you when you said you can't pour from an empty cup. I've heard it said before in another way where it says you can't give away what you don't have. And
Yeah.
so is you can't if you there's nothing in the cup, you can't pour shit out, but you also can't create things that are not there. So like you said, you're empathetic, you have empathy to give. So that's very, very, very high vibrational of you. I heard you say that you had a traumatic childhood. What happened?
Not traumatic, but as my parents were divorced, my dad wasn't around a whole lot. We were, you know, mom writing hot check for groceries, stuff like that. So and I've also looked like a 34-year-old woman since I was about 8. So I was like 5'11", I think, by the time I was in the 4th grade. So just a weird, awkward, uh, a childhood lacking of privilege. I'll put it that way. So not too
Now,
bad. I know there's a lot of people who's had it worse. So
we've come to a point in this fucked up ass country where the things that you just said are just as common as rain.
yeah, absolutely.
But that shit's fucked up. It's not supposed to be that way.
Yeah,
That's still quite traumatic. We're this country got so used to trauma, but I
it's
guess,
true.
from shootings in schools and wherever every fucking day or a couple of times a day to this, it's just like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's just what we do. We get divorced and we shoot people. How are you?"
Right.
Yeah, whatever. I'm getting me a fucking Mexico citizenship. I
Yeah, well, take me with you. I don't know where we're going, but it sounds great, so
what about here to the gays, obviously, to the gays. I really, really like the way the Jalisco cartel runs their state down there. There's nothing but peace in the streets, and people just don't there's you don't you there's no violence, there's no fentanyl in the damn narcotics, that you don't have that foolishness in Mexico. Why the fuck can the cartel run a country better than politicians?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question.
Because they don't lie. I mean, they don't have an agenda. If you fuck up, you, like, die, or you're just gonna be dealt with, and it is what it is.
It is what it is. Exactly.
So, and so that's my love going out to all my Jalisco people down there. Have you ever seen anybody in your profession who just could not deal? I'm talking about somebody who had made it through school and was already in the profession, and then something happened, and they were just like, "I can't even."
Yeah, and I've seen people that were almost a good fit, but then in some very important ways discovered that they were not. So I think the pandemic was an incredibly difficult time for this profession, and I think that if you made it through that, then you probably are made of the tough stuff, and you're going to make it throughout your career. But yeah, it's high pressure. It is incredibly It's incredibly difficult, and a lot of times it's thankless, and a lot of times it's back to back to back to back, and that can be difficult if you don't kind of in a lot of firms, when you have a properly functioning team, you can kind of support one another. So, for instance, if a funeral director has a death in the family, a lot of times it's a little hard to deal with other people's families when you're actively dealing with your own grief. So in those kind of cases, a director might step back from the front of the house stuff and just do prep room kind of stuff. So, or I'm particularly skilled with more tragic kind of cases, or maybe not skilled, but I'm more willing to, put me in there, coach, for a lot of the more difficult cases that some folks shy away from, but I can't do those kind of cases back to back to back. So I might have to.
No, continue.
I saw your quizzical eyebrows, and so I'm waiting for your for your
Um,
question.
what can you give me an example of what a difficult case would be versus a non-difficult case?
Well, we're all gonna die, and I think when grandma dies after 3 months of hospice care, and everybody got to fly in and see her and hold her hand, and you have that time to at least intellectually prepare for a death, or if it's a death that's kind of an in order death. Those, I don't say they're easy. I mean, the person who's burying their mom, it's going to be difficult for them regardless. But those kind of deaths that are expected and kind of feel more natural versus, a 2-year-old who was shot, or a 13-year-old who hung himself, or a murder suicide, or just the tragic kind of circumstances, because the care that the families need, or when there's a death and kids are there. So not physically present with death, but I mean, like, when a child loses a parent, something like that, or a child loses a sibling. Those kind of cases are just a lot more complex and what the families need from the funeral director. And so there's just more coming out of the cup, as it were, than with some deaths that are natural. I don't know if natural is the right word, but I think you get my meaning.
Right. What's your most gut-wrenching memory? Like something that when you think about it, it just
I had a couple of tough cases. I had one, the last place I was working in Louisiana was during COVID, and one lady, God bless her, she lost 6 family members inside of 6 months. They weren't all COVID, but, yeah, she basically lost everyone that she loved. And so, like, the 5th or 6th time when I answered the phone, "Hi, Piero, this is Adrienne," and I heard her voice, I literally was like, "Are you kidding me? I never wanted to talk to you again." And it made her just have a belly laugh, so I'm glad that. that I was the one to help her through that, but that was difficult. I mean, I had one where a kid killed himself, poor dumb kid, and I had to coach his Boy Scout troop were the pallbearers. And so trying to talk that Boy Scout, these kids through what is certainly a foundational moment in their lives. It's the first time they've lost anyone and it's pure. And they're at this like hugely well attended funeral service and all eyes on, and it's the first time they're having to step into that role. And so having to give them kind of giving them the pep talk and the eyebrow nods and the getting them through it, that one stuck with me. That was a difficult one. So there's a lot. I mean, it's really, I think part of the beauty of this job, as draining as it can be, is I get to see some of the most beautiful human moments that are, I had one time we were about to put the urn into the niche, into the wall of the mausoleum. And I don't know, I think he was like 8. It was his grandfather, but they were very, very close. And it was a very tough loss for him. And right at the end, this little kid, I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our services and blah, blah, blah. And this kid just gets up and he goes and he lays on the table and he hugs the urn, and it was just this incredibly beautiful, poignant display, and as hard as that was to kind of navigate, what an honor it is to just see that and to be able to help that kid process that.
Thank God for the silver lining in these dark ass rain clouds. Now, you mentioned the pandemic a couple of times, and when we were in the thick of it all over TV, you saw like the nurses, doctors, frontline workers, morticians, and caregivers as well. So, was there a lot of burnout? Is there anything you'd like
Oh,
the world to know about how the COVID affected y'all, since it really didn't get a lot of media coverage?
well, it didn't. And I guess thanks for noticing that it didn't. So, because it did, I mean, not necessarily me personally, but I've got some colleagues that were working in New York City at the height of it.
Ooh, Lord.
Yeah. I mean, and so when New York had its like a heroes parade kind of a thing, initially funeral directors were not included. And yeah, that was felt by people, because, just little old me in New Orleans, not New York. So we didn't have those kind of numbers. It was a hotspot city. It was bad. It wasn't that bad. But yeah, I mean, I know how many hours I was working a day and how many days on end that I quarantined myself from my family because I didn't want to bring home those germs. And so, I was spending, a week at a time away from them. So it's difficult, not just because of the long hours and the hard work, but being separated from the emotional support of our families, to keep them safe. That's incredibly difficult. And then to have everyone from, rightfully so, but everyone from, the worker who shows up at Walgreens and nurses and Uber drivers, rightfully so, thanked and appreciated for showing up and for getting out there and for exposing themselves to risk so that they could serve their community in whatever way that they do. But then not to have funeral directors included kind of smarted a bit. So, but they did, I know, at least with the first big one, the New York Heroes Parade or whatever, they did add funeral directors, but it was an afterthought. And honestly, I think it's just kind of depressing, I think. I don't think it was like an intentional slight, like, "Oh, stupid morticians, nobody cares about that." It wasn't that, but it was, how do we keep this heroes parade upbeat and like, high five nurses, good job doctors, and great job bringers of the dead. You know what I mean? Like, it's to acknowledge a mortician is to acknowledge death. And I think, at certain points it gets a little sticky, but yeah.
But I love morticians, and from my WWF fandom wrestling days, the
Oh,
Paul
yeah, The Undertaker.
the
Oh, yeah.
Undertaker, Paul Barrows, one of my everyone's fucking favorite character. He's coming there with that bell toning, his theme music and shit. That bitch was boss. So I fucks with y'all. I fucks with it.
We're fun at parties, I'll tell you what. So that was my joke is, I have a degree in religion. I was very politically active back in my day, and I'm a mortician. So, I'm fun at dinner parties, right? So I bring all the good hot topics.
But what kind of reactions do you get from people when you tell them what you do? At the dinner parties or wherever?
So I was in Miami when I first started funeral school. I lived in Miami, and I was the one of the 2 little moments in my life where I was kind of a stay-at-home mom. So my daughter started school in Miami. It's her first time at this school. And so I was doing like, PTA kind of crap and selling pencils and doing whatever. And I had this like PTA buddy lady. I don't remember her name or anything, but anytime we had a little activity, she was my buddy and we, hang out. And then in talking, when I said that I was going to start funeral school, she never made eye contact with me again. So for some people, there's a really serious kind of taboo about it. And people like literally avert their eyes sometimes. So that's kind of interesting. But for the most part, people are just, I think, either shocked because you don't meet many morticians and or shocked because I'm a lady mortician. And so I think that's surprising to them too. And so a lot of times they kind of assume that I'm just a funeral director, not to minimize people that are solely funeral directors, but they assume that I'm just a funeral director and that of course I'm not an embalmer. No. So that's interesting, seeing people's reaction in that way. But for the most part, people are just curious. And I have gotten some very interesting questions from people.
Y'all running from the mortician or averting your eyes, like what Adrian is saying, is not gonna help you to cheat death.
It's true. It's like they think I'm jinxing them.
Yeah, so we better get a grip on ourselves and get with the program. Like King David from the Bible got ready to die. He said, "I go the way of all the earth."
Mhm.
If you wanna believe you're coming back as a butterfly or a stingray or whatever, okay, that's on you. But either way, you gotta die before you can be reincarnated if that's what you believe is going to happen. So you
Right.
can run from death. And the thing that intrigues me the most, or intrigues me, or stands out to me the most about death is something that my spiritual mother, Evangelist Nelson, would tell me when she was alive. She was like, old people don't die as much as young people. And I thought about it. I was like, I've been to a lot of funerals in my life, but maybe 5 of those were old people. Most of them have been people like in between like 20 and 40,
Right.
you know. So no, we won't be running from death, and don't be stupid and think just because you're young that you're guaranteed to live to get old. So get a grip on it, get your spiritual life in order, because eventually you will be laying down on a table in front of Adrian someone.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's I some I don't know. I guess I have my personal belief system. Everything's gonna be okay. It's either nothing or everything's fine. You know what I mean? I believe in a benevolence underlying the universe. And so I'm not afraid of whatever's in the next room, so to speak. You know what I mean? But there are people that are deeply, deeply fearful of it. And it's sad. And so you're right. So the kind of reaction is not to kind of process and reflect on that, but rather to completely avoid it. But that's not how this works. You know, avoiding it, pretending it doesn't exist, it doesn't help.
Yeah, you don't want everything about how you live in this life affects your afterlife. The dead people I know, they still speak to me like in dreams and stuff like that. That's why I don't believe in reincarnation, because they are still spirits. So they couldn't be a giraffe and still hear the spirit talking to me. And so you don't want to part this plane of existence like like in any kind of like spliced way. Like you don't want to like be feeling like you're being ripped. You need to be at a point where you're ready to let it go because
Absolutely.
you don't want a wrecked afterlife. One thing that taught me this when I was in high school, I was a teenager and I woke up dying in the middle of the night. I had like a strange heart rhythm. You
Mhm.
know, it happens in teens. Sometimes it
Yeah.
just does. And I woke up and I couldn't breathe. Like I couldn't catch my breath. I'm not asthmatic. I've never have been.
Right.
It wasn't an episode. It was like, and as this was happening in this dream state or whatever I was in, it's like I was looking down this tunnel at the reception hall at the church that I was attending, but it was like it was the person that I saw was someone who was dead already, and I didn't recognize the other people. So it's almost like it was a flip version of reality, and it almost looked like the dead people were still doing the same stuff that they used to do when they were alive. And as my breath was escaping me, it's like I saw them. And I remember just really, really, really wanting more time because I was, like, somewhere between 15 and 16. You know, I was like, I really wanted more time, and I just could not breathe. I couldn't force myself to breathe. The air was just leaving, and none was coming back in. And I just, like, passed out or whatever, and then I woke up. The Lord wasn't ready for me to die. But what I
Right.
remembered is that I wasn't ready to go, and I hated that sense of not being prepared.
Well, no, and that's back in the old days, people used to carry like little doodads and jewelry pieces that would say memento mori, remember you must die. It's the fact that we know that this is a terminable date, that this life is not forever, makes us value what we have right now. And I think that when you have that kind of experience, that it makes you confront and be purposeful about where you are now, because you have that undeniable experience of knowing that it's not forever, you know?
And I know we're slightly over time. Can you give me another
Oh, I
one?
don't care. I'll talk to you all night. I'm fine. I did it today.
Thank you, I appreciate it. There's a couple of more points that I really, 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 really need to make. Let's talk about life insurance for a second here. Because when my aunt kicked the bucket a couple of years ago, this shit okay, she was one of those ones who like to go spend a per check at the Riverboat Casino
Mhm.
every every month. I'm not judging her for that, with plenty of good times at the casino. She was also one of those ones who believed that the rapture would happen and that she therefore did not need life insurance. Well, she died and she didn't have any life insurance and then she didn't have any savings because it was all up at the casino because she was always gonna strike it rich. Okay. On average, at least down here in Louisiana, I don't know what it is everywhere else, you're looking at about 10-ish grand, okay, to put a bitch in the ground if they're not a
At
veteran,
least.
you know? So if you die and you don't have no money, then that burden then falls to your loved ones to either, I guess, just discard you and leave you in the morgue. Down here, you'll see people having car washes and bake sales and shit, trying to hustle money to pay for a funeral, and these are not necessarily like my aunt was like an older person. I think she was in like her 60s, 70s. Okay.
Right.
But
Right.
a 15-year-old kid who just happened to,
Yeah, it's not a surprise that,
right.
that you might die someday or relatively soon, you know? Yeah, no, it happens all the time. And different places. So, what's the question? So what do you do? Like,
I'm stressing the fact that this sort of thing can tear families down and
oh,
apart
absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
a sibling that I no longer talk to attacked me because in their opinion, all 3 of us siblings were supposed to come up with like $2,500 or something like that. I told my mom to burn her sister up and cremate her. You don't have no money, you don't
Right.
have no options. But my but my mom didn't wanna do that. And so I was like, "Okay, then I will figure out what I'm gonna donate, and then we'll just do the funeral. But I'm giving you the side eye because I don't agree, but I'm still gonna help you
Right.
take care of my mother." But this sibling of mine decided that they were going to come up with the money. This person's always been controlling and I think probably a little narcissistic too, if not much. And so they decided to insult me and call me like entitled and everything because I said, I'm not paying 2,500 or 2,800. Let me see what I can come up with. And then they went and drudged up, you know, over, years ago when I was homeless in Houston, when I got
Right.
HIV and, hepatitis and all of that. And were saying like, you owe this to our parents and they helped you and everything like that. I was like, no, no, they're not doing that. Now is not the time for you to bring up my history and then use it as a weapon to demonize me because you cannot control me. But her not having life insurance is what made the breeding ground for this. Now, this sibling of mine should have been come to me if they had some beef about what I went through.
Right.
They,
Right. And
they
not wait for this terrible loss of your family to then also bring that up. How ridiculous is that? But it happens all the time. And I think it's because it's easier to fight with your siblings than it is to grieve a loss a lot of times. So, but you're absolutely right. Not every state life insurance isn't part of pre-planning in every state, which I didn't really know. So in Louisiana, yeah, if you want to pre-plan, most of the time you sit down, you figure out what services you want, how much they cost, and then you essentially buy an insurance policy to fund it. Not every state does that. So in Maine, they have mortuary trusts, and you specifically cannot have you can't sell life insurance for the purposes of funeral. But the underlying point being, we're all going to die, and a lot of people kind of make some assumptions about what's going to happen or what the contingencies are, and oh, don't worry about me, just donate me to science. That's not how that works. So in most places, you have to be on a donor registry 30 to 60 days before death, and you're still not guaranteed for acceptance if they're all filled up with, you know, 67-year-old chubby white ladies that day. Then your body's not going to be donated, and someone's going to have to pay for your funeral. Now, some states, you know, some places the coroner will step up, or there's indigent funding or something like that. Like the city will pay X amount of dollars for a cremation and Y amount of dollars for a burial, that kind of stuff. So sometimes there are some kind of safeguards, but not all the time, and not every municipality. So there were some parishes in Louisiana. If you had a living blood relation who had a penny to their name, you were not going to be paid for. Your, indigent funeral stuff was not going to come into play. The coroner was simply not going to approve that. So it is wise to, on some level, have some kind of preparation, whether or not that's a life insurance policy, an emergency savings fund, or something like that. I think to your point too, expressing what it is that you want or would want or absolutely don't want. So at some point, I never knew, but my mom, she was like, please don't cremate me. That idea horrifies me. Okay. Duly noted. You know what I mean? So funding notwithstanding, I know what she wants to do. So there's not, because families, a lot of times there is contention about what to do. And the fact that sometimes families are limited by what funds they have available, So yeah, aside from pre-planning, just giving yourself and your family members the grace to, maybe grandma would have wanted a copper casket and the most beautiful spot in a cemetery. But if you're only able to muster a couple of $1,000s, then that's not going to happen. And so let's give ourselves permission to just do what needs to be done, and offer ourselves some grace and forgiveness, and it not being what we wish we could do, you know? But yeah, families fighting all the time, not just about financial stuff, but it becomes, I literally had one time, two sisters, dad died, his two sisters left. And at some point in the arrangement conference, I don't know what made her mad, but she looked over at her sister and she said, I don't even know why you're here making these arrangements. Daddy never even loved you. So, okay. Let's take a step back, ladies. Let's maybe take a deep breath and acknowledge that we're going through some difficult things right now, and maybe not try to rectify the entire history of your difficult sibling relationship right now. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Yeah, we see that.
girl, y'all get life insurance. I don't care how young your
Yeah, get life insurance.
babies
Yeah.
and kids are. My parents have had coverage on on us, on us kids, I think all our lives and shit, just because of course we grew up in the hood with crack houses everywhere and
Huh?
death, at every turn.
Right.
So, they held no illusions about the finiteness of life. Do you think you had a different view of death before getting into this career field as you do now? Or what has it changed it at all or not really?
I guess certain attitudes changed. I think when I first started in this line of work, I was more, I don't say like pro cremation or anti burial, but I kind of lean towards cremation. But since working in the field, it's more worrisome to me because it makes it really easy in a lot of circumstances for families to kind of skip over stuff. And I think it's a similar kind of tendency that people don't make eye contact when they know they're talking to a mortician. It's that, well, we're just going to do cremation and that's it. We're never going to see the body. We're never going to do this. We're never going to do that. It's that. And they think that they can just kind of fast forward to the part where they have dealt with their grief, to some magical closure thing. And if you just skip it, you'll end up at the closure part. And again, it's not how that works. So my attitude towards embalming and visitations and that sort of thing, that has definitely changed. And I'm much more pro spending time with the body, not necessarily embalming, but the first kind of the task of grief is to come to terms with the reality of the loss. And every time that you see the body in whatever manner it is, if it's, if your loved one dies and you put on their clothes or comb their hair or something when you're waiting for the mortician to come, whatever kind of interaction that you can have with your deceased loved one is almost universally going to be to your benefit. It's going to help you process this new reality. People say all the time, I just want to remember her like she was, but she was alive and now she's not. And so that's different. And while denial and while forgetting that a death has occurred, which is super common, in the immediate aftermath of a loss, there's a reason that happens, and that's our brain kind of protecting us from that. So we get a few minutes of like a reprieve from it. But long term, you have to come to grips with the reality of the loss to move forward in your grief journey. And so the tendency of people to just, you know, the mortician comes, takes them away, you never see the body, you sign whatever paperwork and send them your visa and boom, 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 and that's it. That is not it's not the most effective way. It doesn't situate people well to process their grief. And then you have people that have these chronic problems with grief. It's not something that you can just fast forward, as difficult as it is. So that's certainly changed. And I do try to express that and get people to understand that. But partially it's met with a little bit of skepticism. It's like we talked about the old rich white guys throughout the decades just trying to bilk people for more and more money. I think partially people think, oh, is this lady just trying to upsell me? And I'm not. I don't care what you do. It's up to you. It's what's right for your family. But you know, at least getting people to stop and think about that, I think would be beneficial.
Right, because look, y'all, it's not like I've never seen a funeral home go out of business. I've never seen them run out of clientele, so to speak. It's a solid ass career field. You've got the stomach for it. And let's talk about some unusual requests. I just got about like two or three more questions. I'd like you to tell me, we were talking about the dinner parties earlier, and you said you've been asked a few interesting questions. Care to share anything anyone's asked you?
Yeah, I know people vehemently believe that bodies will sit up out of nowhere. They'll just be, look at the prep room, and then just all of a sudden, boom, it doesn't happen. And they'll tell them it doesn't happen. And they're like, no, my Uncle Morty's college roommate's best friend's accountant was, volunteer in the morgue or whatever it was. And they'll argue with me over that. I've had one lady was like, what do you do with the organ? What do you mean? I don't do anything with the organs. They stay where they are. You know what I mean? Like, but she legitimately thought, I guess, I don't know. And it's true. Like back in, I don't know, the 1600s in London, yeah, they did take out the innards, and that was their very rudimentary kind of method at body preservation. So yeah, but it's been a long time since then. Okay. And so we don't, we don't take out organs for no reason, you know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting to see the kind of misconceptions that people have about embalming in particular, I think is really curious about. Yeah.
Do, do the guy cadavers pop boners?
Not really, typically, no, but it depends. Your circumstances of death have a lot to do with the body that you leave behind. So there are circumstances if people are straining or some kind of like cardiovascular event, certain things might have a heightened state, so to speak.
Yeah, because, you read about from time to time, like, these women breaking into the funeral homes to fuck the cadavers, so there has to be something like
See, I've only ever heard the opposite where it's the dude
a
and
dude
such.
going in
So
the cadavers. I could have sworn I heard about girls doing it too, but well, speaking of necrophilia, have you, encountered any of that in your
I have not. No. No. There's there are not necessarily necrophilia, but there is some untoward behavior in the field, and people do need to be aware of that. Not necessarily sexual in nature, but organ there is organ harvesting. My whole spiel I just had about that's not a normal part of it, but there was a lady, uh, I forgot what state. I want to say Ohio. I'm not real sure, but she for cremation, she was essentially harvesting organs and selling them. So there are gross untoward things that happen. But no, I do not associate myself with things such as that.
so you're saying a family would pay for a cremation and this worker would yank the organs out before burning them up and then go and sell them on the black market?
Correct. There's that. There's also people who think that they are donating their bodies to science when in fact they're just donating their body to is that they're body brokers. They sell bodies to sometimes it's for medical purposes. So sometimes it's for medical education. So it's doctors use cadavers in their training. But sometimes there was one in Louisiana a year and a half ago where the family thought that the family was donating the body to a company that then sold the gentleman's body to an oddities company that essentially as a part of like an oddities, a curiosities tour where you'd go and see like the bearded lady and people like hanging from piercings and kind of weird shit like that. And they were essentially autopsying this man for you would pay $250 and be able to watch an autopsy. So, but that was a World War II vet, and the family sure as shit never knew, never had any idea. But that's the thing is people, that there's when finances are an issue and you think that you're making good choices, sometimes you just happen upon some of these gross companies that are not clear in the fine print of what you're signing away. But in that case, although it was morally repugnant and ugh, there's nothing legally, the family donated the body to this company. And so you lose control over what happens at that point. So I
Okay.
do I caution people to be careful about some of these fly by night kind of places that if you look at the fine print, they can do what they want to do, or they can just not take you. More often than not, it's not the being sold for public autopsy. Rather, it's, you have this all set up for some for profit donation company that just doesn't want to pick you up that day. And so they'll just leave you at whatever funeral home happened to pick you up and walk away. And this family that thought that they had made plans and thought that they had a plan in place, come to find out it was kind of at the whim of this nefarious company.
The best thing I learned from watching Breaking Bad was that the devil is in the details.
It
And
is.
we need to read this motherfucking fine print.
Yeah.
In the case of that veteran, since I'm a veteran, I'd have went in there and broke him out. I would've went stole him back. Fuck all that.
Well, and there was a public outcry, and they did bring him back home and tried to restore some honor to his processes, but again, that's they donated the body, and that's most of the time, I hope most of the time, I know people that run donation programs. So most donation programs are good. They're ethical, it's good stuff, but not every single one is. And when people have this tendency to be so avoidant about death in general, you know, if they get so far as to think that they're donating, honestly, that's farther than most people get. So good on them for that. But if it seems too good to be true, it may be, So if it is just some miraculous company where you just sign on the dot and then they're going to come pick up a body and you don't have to have any, that's there's more to it than that. And consumers need to, just like you would when you're buying a car or making any other big purchase, because a funeral for most people, it's like the top 5, top 10 largest monetary purchases you're going to make in your life. So, but whereas a lot of times consumers are savvy in other realms, like, the consumer reports the hell out of a car before they buy it, or they'll look at Better Business Bureau or Ripoff Report or something to see the integrity of the car dealership, for instance, that they would buy that car from. That kind of due diligence doesn't happen with funerals. And so it kind of makes it hard for a consumer to, when you don't acknowledge death is going to happen, you don't plan for it financially, you don't do any of your due diligence in making sure, what services that you're choosing or the provider that you're choosing. And then you wait until the death happens. And then you have to deal with all of that stuff and grief at the same time. It's too much. You know what I mean? So it's kind of the evangelism of, you know, let's just make a plan, everybody. Just tell your best friend, cremate me or, bury me at sea or just make your plans known and, you know, have a way to carry out those plans.
The girl, all very wise advice, Adrian. So the girl who got caught with the organs. Okay, first of all, how did she get caught, and who the fuck is buying organs? Now I'm aware that organs and stuff are used in like witchcraft circles and stuff, especially down here. I know that use, but how did she get caught? Who the fuck is buying it, and who the fuck is what are they using them for?
I don't I wish I had researched that particular case before I brought it up. I don't remember specifically to my recollection. I think that she got caught because there is some control over some donation stuff. So it may be that there were surprise organs, so that there were things that were there and there was not proper accounting for how they got there. I think in her case that she had forged some of the permission forms, purporting to be the next of kin, to sign off on the paperwork that says, yes, you can harvest this organ for whatever purposes. So I think in her case that she was essentially contracting with the family to perform a direct cremation. But hey, she didn't want to let a perfectly good dead body go to waste. And so she would just fabricate the paperwork to then donate some portion, either an organ or whatever kind of donation that she was doing. So, but I don't know. I don't know. Theoretically, I mean, almost all, everyone except Colorado, I believe, has a state board. So there is a professional licensing component of it. So there's like funeral police, as it were. But I don't know. In that particular case, I don't know how she got caught. A lot of times, the ones that are acting badly get caught because stop returning phone calls and they don't return urns. So people just keep calling. It's 6 weeks after death, and you still haven't gotten the cremated remains back. At that point, families get more aggressive, and then when they're not getting answers, then they go to media or they go to a state board or something like that, and then investigations ensue. So,
Girl, and as I was just like trying looking up online about like who might buy stolen organs. This is what I have to do. This is what I have to do when I produce, edit, and, write copy and do the interviews for my own show. So all the studios out there, Paramount, NBC, whoever, one day, whenever you're ready, do syndicate me so I can have a team of producers to do all of this for me so I can focus on doing what I do best. It's a-
I love it. I love it.
yeah,
But no, medical schools, there's actually a centuries old problem of medical cadavers. All the grave robbers of days yore, not only were they trying to steal the jewelry off the corpses, they were actually stealing the corpses to bring them to medical schools, and they'd get paid under the table for every body they brought back in. So no, that's like a thing. It's a thing. There was some huge riot that happened. I want to say it was in Boston. I don't know if it was Harvard, but it was some medical school up in the Northeast in like the 17 or 1800s, really famous riot that happened because bodies kept getting dug up and stolen. And I think the people got caught because they happened to steal a body of someone that had some kind of notable physical attribute, like they had like a club foot or something like that. So they all knew like that's like Tamara from down the street. They knew the body. You know what I mean? So it's crazy. It's crazy. But that's happened for centuries. I don't think it's as prevalent today as it was back in the day. But yeah,
you don't know until you know. I don't put shit past people in this day and time. Man is capable of any fucking bad, low level bullshit skull fuckery. So
yeah,
they're probably
absolutely,
privileged today. So
absolutely true.
So when we were prepping for this interview, you were telling me, and I don't know if you can talk about this online, but you were saying that there was like a Mardi Gras themed a funeral, and I guess people can request different things. Is that something you're able to talk about? Of course, we won't mention the name. 'Cause I need
To me,
people to
that's the
know.
most like feeling part of these funeral. And that's why I don't try to get people to like embalm and have services because I'm trying to sell them stuff. I try to get them to do services because the chores and kind of the prep that we do for these services is how we heal. So in this lady's case, it's just in generally speaking, we want funerals to be personalized. Okay. Not just because every funeral director across the country cannot stand to hear On Eagle's Wings one more time. It's not just because of that, although it is true. It's to the family's benefit to personalize wherever they can, however they can. And so it looks every funeral theoretically would be very different. So recently I buried a lady who she went all out for all holidays. She was like born on Thanksgiving and died on President's Day. I mean, she was all about holidays, and the family decided to have her service just by happenstance on a Tuesday that, thanks to their South Louisiana funeral director, they knew was Mardi Gras, was Fat Tuesday. And so they leaned into it. So when I tell you, look, these people up in Dover, New Hampshire, walking in, it was great. Some of them came in costumes. I was very impressed. Mostly it was like Lakers, LA Lakers, like jerseys and stuff, but they came in like tutus and stuff. We had beads, we had Mardi Gras decorations everywhere. And it's not, I think maybe Martha Stewart would be horrified. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily the kind of somber, like, ooh, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But it honored her. It honored her spirit. So we had a playlist that was a mixture of her signature karaoke tunes and, Dr. John. So all kinds of stuff. And I don't know, it was the process that the family went through to get ready for it is therapeutic. So when you sit and you make a playlist or you gather the pictures or you decide what readings honored them or, what want to show their quilt collection or what have you, whatever kind of ways that families can grapple is great. So I try to help them figure out the balance between not being overwhelmed and not like having this pressure to like interest it to death. You know what I mean? Like you're not putting together a funeral or a remembrance or a visitation or a service for other people. And I try to remind them that you don't have to do shit. Okay. So, but whatever you can do is going to be to your benefit. And then whatever feels overwhelming to you, let me do it. So obits are a really good example of that. Like in my family, I'm the obit writer. Obviously I word good, you know what I mean? So that's how I grapple personally. And so, but for other people, the thought of a semicolon just sends shivers down their spine. So I'll like get them started, but then, get all the boring formatting stuff taken care of and then give it to them so that they can do kind of the artful part of it and put in the biographical stuff and what the person's really about. So that's my job is to do what I can to lay a foundation so that families can really remember and celebrate whatever it was about their loved ones that made them unique and happy.
I think what they did is what Jesus had in mind when he told us to rejoice when someone dies and to mourn when someone is born. You know, to die is to be released from the cares of this world. To create a human life is to create somebody for a lifetime that's not gonna
Yeah.
always keep
Of
themselves
suffering that they never asked for.
right.
Versus, yeah, release. So, but I think that that's reflective of, I think that you probably have what I would call a healthier attitude towards the great unknown. But for people that are like scared of hell and scared of whatever it is that, their conceptions of worry is, I don't know. I feel bad for people who have that fear. And I'm glad for, folks like you and I that have a little more faith in the okayness of whatever it is that happened, you know?
It was HIV. Like getting HIV is what sealed my mortality and my like consciousness. Even though I was close to the Lord and and all of that, I still had not accepted the finality of death until about 30 when I got HIV. And once I got that diagnosis, it was like and then is I g- I just came to terms with it. I was sad about it, but the reality was always there. It was just a
Yeah,
shift of perspective. And then that let
absolutely.
me know that I'm not actually gonna live forever, and then there went my illusions of invincibility,
Mm.
which was a
Well,
good
and
thing. I'm glad for that.
no, absolutely, absolutely. A lot of people have heard of the stages of grief, the 5 stages of dealing with grief. It's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that was written about people facing their own mortality. It wasn't about people who were grieving loss. It was about people who were facing impending death. And that is in those cases, I think they were very, very sick, obviously, at the end of their lives. But it's to your point. When we have this something that we can't escape, that we have to deal with, we deal with it. And I'm glad that you found peace. And I bet that you have more meaning and purpose in your life because when you know what I mean? When you know that death is absolute and that this no day is guaranteed, you typically are a little bit more serious about what you do with your days and you don't waste time on the bullshit. So,
You got that right. You don't waste time on the bullshit. Mm. Gotta let all of it go. As you said, I'm thinking about this 4.5 year relationship that I had, which I just had to end the other month, and I'll be doing a show on that, you know, in a couple of weeks on covert narcissism because he was
oh
that
yeah.
the whole thing. I didn't know covert narcissism was a thing, and that's who I've been in this relationship with for all these years. But look out for the solo show on that. Mentioned burying someone out to sea earlier, and it could not tie in better to what I discovered when I was poking around online the other day. Y'all, I did not know that cruise ships have morticians and like a whole morgue and shit down there in the boats because bitches drop dead. It's only a 7-day damn cruise, and they're expecting someone to die. To the extent that they have permanent morgues installed into the fucking Carnival cruise and whoever the fuck else. Can you tell us about this? Because this is like what the fuck is this? What is this?
I don't actually have specific. Now, I've never been on a cruise. I don't know much about cruise morgues specifically, but yeah, people die all the time, and dying involves a lot of paperwork, and people don't realize that. So having dedicated crew that are there because, where you die, international waters, I guess whatever flag is leaving on top of the ship is going to control some of the paperwork aspect. But yeah, formerly they would either put you in a barrel of whiskey or put you out in the ocean and drop you in the ocean. So because you have to do something with the dead bodies. So hey, it's great that there's a board there because you're not going to be pickled or just dropped into the ocean. So hey. It's funny too because my prefector, so the person who taught me during my apprenticeship, was the makeup. He was a licensed cosmetologist before he came into this field. So he did cruise ship hair and makeup and stuff. So I learned from the best. It was great because I was a real tomboy before. So, but now I'm very good at makeup. So thanks, Mr. Lopez.
I see those lips from over here, girl. You giving me life. And so this is the final question for real this time. So it has to do with cremation versus burial. Besides the cost difference, I'm curious, is there any other differences you would want people to know? And then while you're talking about that, while I was researching this, apparently people find interesting objects in dead bodies in your career field. So, like, I was reading an article and they burned the person's body up, and out came a belt buckle that they had ingested at some point in their life. And it was, I guess, there or whatever. When they were digging around in a non cremated body, they found a fucking mouse in this woman's intestines. So, I was curious, have you ever come across any interesting foreign objects in anyone? And then talk to us about burial versus cremation.
um, I have not found any mice in people. I have because again, so most of the time when we're embalming someone who hasn't had an autopsy performed on them, we don't get in there. So there may be all manner of things inside that we are not aware of. But you're right. So with cremation, part of the cremation process is the metal that's left over. And sometimes it can be very interesting metal. So, and sometimes people want that metal back. So I've had people that wanted to I think it was a World War II vet that had a bullet that they never could extract. So the family wanted the bullet after he was cremated, so we could make that happen. We also had a lady who's I don't know, this her mom had all kinds of spinal surgery, and that lady got every bit of metal back and made some art with it or some such. So the fact that people want some of these things back is kind of a wonder to me sometimes. But hey, whatever works in your process, that's good on that. You know what I mean? No, and just in terms of, I've had some special requests for things that go into the casket. That's always fun. I had one family that was really worried that their loved one would be uncomfortable. It looked like the casket bed was a little too stiff or something. So they brought in a swimming pool raft, like one of those rectangular rafts for a swimming pool. So we had to put that underneath the person before we could lay them out in their casket. So there, and then of course, all manner of things that people slip into caskets. I actually had someone who was trying to put in a gun into the casket before the casket went for cremation. And I had to explain that that's not going to work. We can't be doing that there. So, but no, just in terms of the differences between burial and cremation, the main thing, and I talked about that before, is I want people to understand that just because you're cremating doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to see the body in some manner beforehand, nor does it limit what you can do after the cremation happens. So a lot of people think, oh, well, grandma's going to be cremated, so no one can see her beforehand. But you can. You may have to pay, depending on the firm, you may have to pay an extra couple $100, but you typically there are some very narrow circumstances that might prevent it, but generally speaking, you can see an unembalmed body privately, with just a handful of people, and that's good. And I wish more people knew about that and took advantage of that because, like I said, it's going to help them process long term. So almost every time I hear someone say, "Well, I don't know if I want to see her like that." You got to remember when they come into our care, and if this does go on the web. So when people die, here's what people look like when they die. Okay. And you see them in the hospital and they've got tubes and and it's very, very uncomfortable. And no, you don't. If that's your parting memory, you don't want to remember them like that. You would much prefer to remember them like they were. Okay. But that's where I come in. And so you coming down embalming, we can go from to so they look peaceful and you can see them at peace. And so, when you've got, caregivers who've been seeing someone suffer for years and years and years, to see them, have a little pink in their cheeks again, and to look at rest rather than, in writhing and suffering, it's a better parting image. And so I hope people keep that in mind and take more advantage of all the services that they can and don't limit themselves. You know what I mean? Because they make these assumptions. Again, because nobody wants to talk about death and nobody wants to look into services and nobody wants to call around and do this and that and all the kind of prep work. So it happens and then they get through it as quickly as they can. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it puts people in a tough spot.
Oh, fuck me in the tits with a dick. What great, what phenomenal information you have given us, Madam Zetty. That's all my questions for you. If there's any final words you'd like to say to the world, you've given us a heap load of information that we didn't know before. I look forward to releasing this episode. And the last thing I have to say is just remind you, bitches get life insurance. If there's anything you'd like to say it, and then we'll go ahead and close it out.
Say it. I would say it. I think that's one of the secrets of happiness of life that I have discovered as a funeral director is I knew more and better than most that this day is not guaranteed. And you never know. You never know when there's going to be a car accident. You never know. You really don't. And so people struggle with death because, like you said, it's final. So if you've got some shit to say that. If you love someone, tell them. If you're mad at somebody, tell them. If you've got these like lingering things, it's when someone dies and you can't tell them anymore. That's what really hurts for a lot of people. So, you know, tomorrow is not guaranteed, you guys. So call your mom or if she's a bitch, fuck that bitch and call your best friend instead and talk about your feelings and just get it out there because pretending it's not going to happen is not going to stop it from happening. So you might as well just be open, be honest, and trust that it's all going to be okay because it is.
And that's the tea. Y'all heard it from me. Everything is going to be all right. Thank you for joining us today, my dear. I love you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been absolutely delightful.
Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Feel free to reach out to me directly at devannon@sexdrugsandjesus.com and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Devannon, and it's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.